Hi, Scott.
Hello.
I'm just waiting for folks to show up. Manu, good day.
Good
How are you?
morning, guys. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Scott.
Hey,
Hello.
I'm just gonna give folks a couple more minutes to show up, and then we'll begin. Starting to share my screen. We can tag along. All right. Um, 3 minutes past. I don't know how much we're gonna do without more people on the call to give us another, more pairs of eyes. But let's. By the way, let me just stick the meeting minutes into the chat so you can add yourselves. At least we have a record of who is here. Okay, meeting minutes are in the chat window. All right, I see that you found them. Cool. All right, so let's just quickly do what we can. So to the reference architecture, I added this picture, which basically mimics what we mirrors what we discussed last week. And then I added a table with some text, which I'm happy to change, but it was just to put some words to paper. And just going like left to right or top to bottom. Um, there is workload template. It's the basis for instantiating running workload. Um, we can have multiple identical workload instances from the same template. And I said the template may comprise both code and configuration because, as I said, different code, same code may do different things depending on how it's configured. Again, feel free to critique anything that's written here. I'm not strongly, I don't feel strongly feel about any of the words here. It's just something to say. Okay, workload instance refers to one executing instantiation of a given workload. Or maybe should I say of a given workload template to tie it to the previous one. Workload instance may be an aggregation of several individual workload. Uh, maybe I should sub instances that present externally as one. Maybe I'll say it's not shown in the diagram. All right. Third one, workload identity. A single workload instance may have several distinct aliases, workload identities. This can be helpful, for instance, when presenting one identity to clients of a workload and another to its relying parties.
So, so I'm trying to understand instance. If a single to a one executing instantiation. So that's basically one TE running the
Maybe multiple TEs, right? Okay, three cases. The degenerate case is one T, one executable, right? So
yeah.
that's pretty simple. A more complex case would be you have something running on your CPU, something on the GPU, something running on your smart NIC, but from the outside, it's all the same. It's
Yeah.
attests as one as a complex entity, and it gets a credential. Now, that credential can be tied to a key stored in any one of these, T's, because the key is not unlikely to be using key splitting, right?
Yes,
Uh,
understood.
okay, so that would be an instance. But
So
I would say, let me just finish. So the last one, more complex case, is payroll database. Payroll database is, from the outside perceived as a single instance, but internally could be fairly complex structure, right? So uh, maybe that needs to be, explained here.
So no, what I was reacting to is, and I should have said TE. What I meant was a single machine. For instance, in an autoscale cluster, do you see, because when you look at workload identity, you mentioned a single workload instance. So my question is an instance of a workload running in one machine different
Uh,
from,
yeah. So let's maybe disambiguate this. So, definitely multiple machines, right? So again,
yes,
when I say I'm talking to a payroll database or a payroll application, some sort of payroll service, is probably a load balancer that's behind it. There is a number of compute instances, and behind that there are some databases, and maybe there's some queuing going on. Like who knows? There's a
yes.
lot of stuff happening,
It's
but
like you like to say, it's basically a single, long-lived endpoint identity, right? That you
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
you can hit. Yes.
So I still like to think about it as a workload. So, like, I mean, maybe I can let me put it to do here.
Well, it's
Ex
really for the next ones because you say a single workload instance may have several distinct aliases, but I assume that in the example of indeed a long-lived, workload running on autoscale cluster of some sort, all the instances, right, I mean, so do you call multiple machine a single instance, or is it each instance running on
no,
each
I would say
individual machine?
at some level it's a single instance. Like once you
I
zoom
see.
out,
I
right?
see.
So there is a country of America, but then you can zoom in and there's a state of Washington, and then there you zoom in and there is the county called King, and then inside of
Understood.
it, they're all sort of entities in that sense. So depending on the
How do
context
you
in which you
call
operate.
the executable that runs in one physical machine or bundle of
Well,
executables, right?
if I'm
Versus the
if
other
I'm
one.
interacting with a workload in an aggregate, but not with one of the executables inside of one of its T's, then to me that thing doesn't have an identity. I don't really recognize it as a unit that I care about.
Uh, th- that's right, except from the verifier point of view, right? The verifier is going to look at those as independent platforms or machines, right? And needs to identify, it needs to be able to take these individual platforms and attestation results will be different in each one of those machines because
Yeah,
they're signed
except
with different keys.
right, so you don't deal this is sort of the type of thing I'm hoping to get with the workload identity too, is you no longer need to deal with attestations of individual
I,
platforms.
I agree. What I was going to say is to get to the next point that all of these individual executables that run in separate machines, they all have, at the end of the attestation verification process, need to have acquired the same identity, right? So
No,
basically
no,
getting the
not
same
that's not
credential.
true. That's not true. So okay, let's take a look at why I would say that a single workload can contain multiple identities. So let's say I have a payroll service. So it's a fairly large thing that has many building blocks. And to that payroll service, I may connect as a client of the payroll service, in which case I'll be presented the identity of the payroll service.
I'm sorry,
Uh,
I misspoke. I agree with you. I misspoke. What I meant was at the end of the attestation verification phase stage,
Yeah.
the each individual executable that run on different machines within a cluster that represents one single instance of the workload. But each one of these individual machine must be equipped with all the bundle of identities, the same. They need to represent the same
All the
entity.
identities that that particular executable may need, right? So
Yes,
in a
but they
service, in
have
a
all
complex
the same,
service,
right?
well, not, okay, so in a complex service, imagine, just let's take something a fairly simple complex service. We'll have one TLS terminator for incoming requests, and then we'll have a bunch of horizontally scaling compute instances behind it.
Yes.
Uh, so in order to connect to that service and authenticate the service to know that I'm talking to the payroll service, you're
Yep.
talking to you're receiving the credential from the TLS terminator,
Okay.
right? So that basically says, I'm JP Morgan's payroll service. And that credential lives on the TLS terminator. It does not live on the individual compute instances. Now,
No,
compute instances, in turn, right, may say, I'm the payroll service, and I'm going to go talk to some sort of payroll database.
yes.
Uh, Hold on. Yogesh said, please record the meeting. Aren't
I
we not
think it is
recording it?
recorded, no?
I believe it's automatically recorded. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
when I connect to the meeting, it says this is recorded.
Yeah, for me
Yogesh,
too.
why would you say that it's not? Okay.
I
I
see
saw
that it
recording.
is in the top right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
see it.
okay. So we're recording. All right. So I then the identities that are needed for outbound authentication on the back end. You may still say, well, this is the payroll service, but it may in fact be a different identity for the same workload, for the same
Yes.
larger workload. So if you look at it from the outside, it presents one identity to connecting clients and a different identity to, some of the backend services.
Okay.
And all of
Uh,
this may need an explanation because I think I like if we're discussing it here, then somebody's going to have that
yes.
same question down the line. This is why it's important to capture all that.
Yes. And I think what this discussion also brings up that we have not really touched on, and that is in our work we realize was important is the concept of boundaries. So because we talk about isolation boundary of a process in a specific CPU or GPU in executable environment,
Yeah,
but the what we are defining here is essentially concentric boundaries, right? And the relying party and empathy that you had, expressed is the fact that you want a bunch of codes that runs on a bunch of machines to basically be identified as one thing with one specific
yeah,
boundary.
right.
Uh,
Which, by the way, there's something else I wanted to mention that so down in the um, in the various flows that we present here, so remember that those these pretty diagrams, there is no way for a workload here to specify which identity it is after, or maybe it's a group of identities. We haven't said that. And in the one case that we just discussed briefly, where I say, I issue a credential, like a certificate to a TLS terminator, perhaps, and that's the thing that authenticates inbound or authenticates the service to inbound clients, right? And then there is a separate credential that may be given to compute instances that authenticates the compute instances to some sort of backend service. In that case, there are, two distinct uh, entities that each get their own credential. Now, yes, it's a credential for the workload, quote unquote, but they are requested by different Ts, perhaps with different attestations, whatever. I can also see a case where a single executable may decide to obtain different credentials to talk to different backend services. And in that case, when either attestant says, I would like to get a credential for myself for a particular identity, you need to be able to specify which identity you're after. Now, we do not have a facility like this that I'm aware of, but I believe we need to think this through exactly how this manifests.
okay.
But I just believe that's missing from our discussions today. All right, so we went through workload instance, and again, I can explain the different levels of disaggregation. And then the workload identity will say a single workload instance. Again, look at it as a blob. It may have several sub instances, may have several distinct aliases, and these are the workload identities And that's helpful when you present one identity to clients of a workload and another to its relying parties. Okay, that's the thing I just mentioned, that we can have multiple aliases. And then the workload identifier is that's now for the workload identity. Each workload identity may comprise several workload identifiers. I don't know actually this is correct, because an identifier we should check, because they're really you don't comprise several identifiers on the same identity. I think it's an identifier and a set of additional claims. So I think that needs to
It's
be.
except when the workload is acting on behalf of other entities. You need,
Yeah, we
because
should. Delegation is important. Yeah.
yeah, because the a given workload, I mean, that's exactly what we have in our system. A given workload is talking to another workload, although the workloads themselves, sorry, the workload instances themselves have their own identities and identifiers to establish a connection between, each pair of them.
Mhm.
When they act on behalf of other entities, then they use another set of identifiers, and those identifiers, there can be millions of them because they act on behalf of millions of entities.
Yeah.
So it really, and then they are perceived, right, by the relying party, they're perceived as an agent of another entity. And so that's how you,
Right.
that's the,
We mentioned delegation in last week's call, and I think it was kind of left as an open uh, item. Like we didn't exactly know how to express it. And frankly, I do not know if it falls under identity, where you can have sort of your own identity and on behalf of identity. Or if it falls, if identity just should be left alone, and it is more along the lines of, I'm identifying myself. So like, but somehow you need to, there has to
I
be a
see what you
way
mean.
to
I see
express.
what you mean. We may be able to separate those two layers
Or maybe it's
essentially.
its own thing. Maybe it's its own thing.
Yes.
Maybe a workload
Yeah.
has an identity and an identifier.
And when it
And it
acts on
really
behalf of
falls on the
another one.
credential. Maybe it falls on the credential to say, then by the way, I am, I'm giving you something for the act on behalf of identifier.
Yeah, so I do think it is, and in fact, it is architected that way in our system, but it is, how to say that? It's the same code, right? The same workload instance that runs, and then it identifies itself as, indeed a long-lived set of identifiers to relying parties, but then uses another set of identifiers and credentials when it is acting on behalf of another entity. So there is a different layer there. There is a different level. So maybe indeed we keep it separate, but we need to be cognizant of it because otherwise we end up colliding or collapsing the
Yeah,
fact that each when an agent, so the agentic paradigm is the same piece of the same workload instance, to use your words, will be acting on behalf of billions maybe of humans,
yeah.
right?
So I don't know. My immediate intuition is we should carve this out into a separate concept rather than trying to wedge it into either of the ones we have on the screen.
That's fine. Let's just not forget it. Yeah.
Because there is, yeah, no, absolutely. So there is, and I didn't say anything about workload credential, but let me actually add something here. Um, so I want to note it. Um, something like that.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, and already I mentioned that the comprising of several workload identifiers, that's I don't I think I think there's got to be a primary identifier, and then there is going to be a set of additional claims. And maybe I could just quickly pull up our definitions just to see what we said. Um, Definitions. How good it is to have everything easy to find. So we talked about identifier is a stable construct represented by workload identity document. Verifiable statement binds to cryptographic identity. You at a minimum assign public key and optional number of additional claims. Okay, so identifier can have a single public key and a number of additional claims. That makes sense. So then going back here, so you can actually have a workload identity. Maybe a workload identity can only have a single identifier. Otherwise it gets a little schizophrenic.
Well, it's not schizophrenic in the sense that, I mean, maybe I'm going to introduce another concept, but I think it is important because it ties to the identifier thing. It's the relationships. So you're not schizophrenic, Mark, because you have many different types of relationships with lots of other humans, and you may be known, to me, you're known as Mark Novak. You may have other, friendly names or other ways of identifying yourself to other folks. So you're not schizophrenic. You just have, in each context of each relationship, you have a different set of way of expressing your identity and way of verifying yourself or, proving yourself to
Okay.
the other party in that relationship.
So here we
So
say workload identity is the alias of the workload as perceived by the relying party based on which workload identifier is presented to by workload instance.
right,
So,
essentially in that relationship, it's in the
so
relationship
it really
between
does
the
say the same thing here. So workload identity can have multiple identifiers.
yes.
Um, so identity, okay, so identity is an alias for a workload instance. But then I see that's where I'm, you know, that's where I'm like identifier, then it can an identity still like do both of these relationship instance to identity and identity identifier need to be one to many? Or is it just one of them?
Say that again.
Okay, do both of the relationships, instance to identity and identity to identifier, do they need to be one to many in both cases? Or is it one to one between identity and identifier and one to many between workload instance and identity?
I think you have one identity. I mean, I'm using you as an example. I have one identity. It's me. I'm myself, but different relationships. In fact, my identity is the collection of all my relationships. And how my reputation, my actions in the world, and all that. That's my identity. I am who I am because of in my relationships with others. I would not, if I was the only entity in the universe, I would not have even the need for an identity because I would not have any relationship with anyone. So I think there is one identity with lots of relationships and lots of and individual identifiers and credentials within each one of those relationships.
Okay, that's not what it says in our definitions because see, we're basically saying an identity
I,
is the alias, is one of the alias. Like so, basically saying you can have multiple identities, right? One entity, one workload instance can have multiple identities because it talks to different parties. Now, you are saying is that there is one identity, but it may take on multiple aliases expressed as identifiers.
Yeah, we write those things. We try to converge towards definitions. I may have, glossed over this, and sorry for that. I'm just expressing. I'm telling you how we try to understand the architecture that we arrived at, and how we try to talk about it. But you had given me the feedback that it wasn't always clear. So I'm following also your guidance, trying to figure out is there a better way to talk about it.
Yeah, well,
So
as you see, I'm not 100% sold. This is such a dicey area because anyone who's worked in identity has its own
right.
set of beliefs about how the world is structured.
But this is an important point, Mark, actually, that you're making. I've been fighting with not fighting, I've been arguing with the identity for a long, long time because these folks, that industry is thinking in terms of domain-centric identity. What we are talking about here, and especially because we tie to individual chips, we're really talking about entity identities, and that is a fundamental difference. So, the whole to me, the reason we have problems on the internet today is precisely because we have fragmented the identity of individual entities. An entity, a single entity in the world today, has many different identities, domain-centric identities in different domains. And now we need to somehow recorrelate them or re-stitch them together. And we have privacy issues and all kinds of other things. What we have the opportunity here to define identity differently, because we go all the way down to individual chips that have their own unique, universally unique identities, and then we can stitch together a specific workload that has its unique, workload instance that has its unique identity running on that specific chip. And then we can bootstrap that to then, do cryptography on behalf of entities. That's the agentic piece. And that will actually be necessary for the provenance piece. Because if you don't know where the bits have been, if you don't know on what chip, in what data center, in what country, put there by a specific human who is authorized, has authority that comes from another place, that's how you actually solve the provenance problem, is by making sure that an entity in the world or in the unit in the physical world is represented by a single identity in the digital realm, even if that identity is expressed differently in different relationships for privacy, business confidentiality, and other reasons. So that's, again, I think we are, correct in our mental model, but I am not just like you. I'm feeling things in the dark, right? Trying to figure
Yeah.
out
I
if this
I
works.
mean, I'm listening to you talk, and you know, what I'm thinking at the moment, again, may change, but I'm thinking that having multiple identities for workload instance is still something we want to do, just because different uh, you present different uh, I guess facets of yourself to different entities you interact with. Uh,
I
in
I think
fact,
I
and it
think
could be also for privacy reasons. Like, I may want to disclose one thing to my clients and another thing to my servers.
very much so. Very much
But
so. So,
I'm then
so
thinking that identifier to identity should be one to one.
Okay, so you see, I think it's interesting. We're getting very, very close here to I think when you talk about the word identity, you're expressing it again from the relying party perspective that, Bob is perceiving Alice in a certain way, right? And so Bob basically says, this is Alice's identity. And so, of course, from the relying party perspective, if we say multiple relying party need to talk to Alice, Charlie talks to Alice, and Charlie perceives Alice with maybe as a different identity. And in fact, for privacy reasons, like you said, it should be perceived as different, entities, at least until Alice agrees that Bob and Charlie can talk to her, knowing that it's the same entity. But from Alice's perspective, which is the vantage point that I'm taking, Alice is one and only one entity, and so Alice has its identity, the one that is managed and manages all the relationship, all the credentials, all the identifiers, so that Alice can express itself
Right.
to others in
Well,
different ways.
the two, right. You're correct that I'm looking at it from relying party perspective because, I need manageable solutions. But the two things are not in conflict with each other,
No,
right?
no,
So,
it's just that we use the same word for the other side of the relationship, where it's the way we look at that identity, what identity means. So it's not
uh,
in conflict, it's just different vantage points, and so we just need to
oh,
decide
like the
which
thing
one it
is,
is.
if in your world, an entity has a single identity, right? That is, you know, that is going to preclude having a one-to-one relationship with an identifier. But then, how do you
No,
create privacy, like
no,
in
no, no,
terms
no,
of?
no, no, no. That's the thing, is because I may be coming towards you, but at the same time I'm struggling because so for us, for in our implementation, an identity is independence, just like the entity has an independent existence. The entity has its own identity, but then it has relationships. And so we have this concept of relationships that we express always in combination with identity. So I guess what am I trying to say here? If you want to, if you using a word identity here from the perception of Alice in each
Yeah,
one of these
yeah,
relationships, then that's fine with me. I just need to shift my thinking.
yeah.
But then in each one of these relationships, it should only have one identifier, right? Otherwise, Bob cannot recognize. So that's where we're going now is basically saying, is it a one-to-one or one-to-many? It really depends on how you define identity and how,
Well,
if
so to me, an identity, like, yeah, so as I said, identity is an a alias,
an identity is an alias,
is an alias for workload. Yeah.
then there's only one, then the identifier is the identity. Because
Correct. Correct. One to one. So the identifier just gives you, just formalizes the set of claims, a stable construct, stable set of claims that says this is this particular alias for the workload. So having multiple is kind of, that would be schizophrenic because like I'm Alice, and if I'm going to give you different sets of claims for for what Alice means, you're going to get confused.
well, it's again in the same relationship, there's only one,
Yeah,
identifier and one,
right.
set of credentials.
So I would probably then say one to many, except as noted below. Um, so each workload identity um, corresponds to exactly one workload identifier, which in turn I think that would be. I think that is actually the cleanest.
Yeah, I need to think. It collides with the way we think about stuff, and I'm not
Well,
equipped
so
to
long
argue too much. But
but we need to make sure it works for all. So we'll need to figure out how to make that work. Like I don't
how
want
to
to leave
map
you
it, yeah.
out in the dark because again, whatever your
I,
delta from this is, you're not going to be the only one.
yes, and I guess what I'm when it, we need to keep moving because of that provenance thing. I think that provenance thing and the agency, challenge, I think is gonna maybe invite us to go and revisit those initial definitions. Maybe not. Maybe we
So
will add, once we talk about independent entities and agents working
yeah.
or are doing acting on behalf of those entities, then maybe we'll introduce the concept of relationships at the entity level, not just, TLS connections between workloads. Because now those workloads have a TLS connection, they are exchanging information, but they are exchanging information about Mark. And Mark, the workload is acting on behalf of Mark to do
Yeah.
something, with a
So
workload that is
this
acting on my
is
behalf.
this is what we say in provenance today. It's a unique linkage between a workload credential and the trusted entities responsible for the creation or attestation of the corresponding workload.
Yeah, but see, that's where, and I've had that problem from the beginning, is that we use the term entities slightly differently, and we bumped into that last week. In this case, and that's why I said
Well,
the
let's not
payroll.
choose entities. These are not entities, they're creators. They're creators of the workload.
Okay,
The entities
so
here just refers to specifically vendor, developer, credential issuer. These are all the parties. Let's not use the word entities. They're all the trusted parties. Okay, I would replace entities with parties. responsible. So there are all these things out there, here's a developer who wrote the code. Here's you know, somebody
Yeah, but you see,
who,
they themselves are entities, right? Because they themselves have pieces of software like a CI/CD pipeline
yeah,
that acts on behalf of, and then it
sure.
pushes bits to another thing. So but yes, do you want to call them what? Creators?
Well, they're for one, they're trusted,
Yeah,
right?
so
I
so
mean,
the provenance really, the provenance problem I need to solve is that if you are sending me $100, thank you, Mark.
yeah,
The provenance is between you as an entity, using, of course, the workloads that have been put in place by other people and other
yeah,
actors right in the middle.
yeah,
And then it's between you and me. So as two entities, we want that provenance and integrity and confidentiality and privacy between these individual entities, and we want to, make sure that all the actors in the middle, all the men in the middle or persons in the middle are, verified and acting
right,
as intended,
yeah,
and not that no unauthorized, no party without, um, um, proper authority can actually interfere with the bits that are exchanged.
right. Okay, hold that thought. I'll be back in like 3 minutes.
Okay.
I need to take a quick I'm back.
Welcome back.
So, I was just thinking, they don't need to be trusted, and the linkage doesn't need to be unique. I think we need to actually change things a little bit.
Yeah.
What I would propose would be this. For one, instead of saying this is unique linkage, I would say something like along the lines of unambiguous linkage. So you can
Linkage, you mean?
clearly identify unambiguously. This is not going to be like, well, I
It's
think it was
verifiable.
Josh.
I think it's verifiable. You want to use if you want to use, terminology that ties back to verifiability and, zero trust type language. I think we should say it's a verifiable linkage.
Okay, let's try that. So verifiable linkage between a workload credential, and they don't need to be trusted,
That's right.
but I would say identifiable parties, something like, how is that?
So you're talking about the workload provenance. So it's the workload. It's the workload template
No,
provenance.
workload provenance is no. This is tied to the credential, right?
So it's
So
the
again,
instance.
so the credential goes back
Oh,
to, right? Because the credential is tied to the identifier. Identifier matches the identity, and identity is, issued to the
okay.
workload.
Between the workload credential.
So again, I'm the relying party, right? I was given this credential. That's all. The only thing I know about my workload is the credential. I know nothing else, right? What
Yeah.
else can I know? There's nothing else I can know. And uh, what I do with that is I'm looking at that credential, and that's what we discussed previously was there's going to be some sort of a breadcrumb in there. And the breadcrumb I can follow to find out, oh, so it was issued by this credential issuer, my credential authority, for instance. So let me find out from there, there's some way of discovery. Like we're not going to specify it here. I would like to reference outside, uh, sources for this. But the idea is,
There's a
follow
registry somewhere.
follow the
Yeah.
breadcrumb trail to find all these identifiable parties. Who developed it, who sold it, or which repository
Got
did it
it.
come
Got it. Got
from?
it. Got it. Responsible for the creation and attestation of
Yeah,
the.
like verifiable is good. Like I should be able to just not just have this linkage, but like also put some trust in it.
Right.
And but the parties don't need to be trusted. Like trust is I
I
get to
agree. I
decide if
agree.
I like them, but I should be able to identify them for the purposes of establishing trust.
Right. I agree. Yeah, that works.
Right. So then I can commit this, right? Just did the edit. Where is the
Don't ask me. I just can't use Git. It's a
No, I use Git all the time. I just don't understand why it wouldn't.
yeah. I've tried a few times and then I give up and I never build enough
Ah, there we
mastery.
go. It just scrolled off my screen. That's fine. Okay. I'm going to create a pull request and I will see if others want to um, approve or comment on it. Okay. So going back to this, to the workload credential. So we still need to talk about delegation. We did talk a little bit about provenance. Um,
Yeah, because yeah, I agree. That's where the challenge lies, right? The not just the third party risk, but the fourth party risk, the fifth party risks, as with all the chains of people who do things and touch data and touch in bits and whether you have verified them all or not.
Right. Well, I do not know how much more progress we can make today.
Yeah, it's just the two of us
And
now.
right, and I don't know how to proceed with the ITF. But for that, I guess I'm hoping to enlist Henk and Yogesh again
Okay, so let's call it
because
a day.
yeah, I will probably call it today, and I will.
Sounds
Well,
good.
I'll email the mailing list with a couple of things, and
Sounds
then
good.
I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, Mark.
All
Take
right,
care. Be
take
well.
care. Oh,
Bye.
by the way, yeah,
This
you
is this
sh
is recorded. This is recorded, right? So
that's
in
fine.
public stuff.
That's fine.
Talk later. Bye.
We'll talk later. Okay, bye.
Thanks.